Leo, something is ending in you, and the strange part is, it may not look dramatic from the outside at first. No explosion, no grand announcement. Just a quiet moment when you realize you cannot keep carrying what has been costing you your spirit. You may have smiled through too much lately. You may have stayed gracious in rooms where you felt unseen. You may have kept showing up with warmth long after your heart started whispering, "This is no longer love, this is labor." And if that truth has been catching in your throat, if you have felt more tired than usual, more sensitive to disrespect, more aware of who only reaches for you when they need your fire, then this message may be finding you right on time. Because this season is not asking Leo to become louder, it is asking you to become truer, and those are not the same thing. A lot of people think they understand you because they can see your confidence when it's turned outward. They see the charm, the resilience, the way you know how to hold a room together when everyone else is unraveling. They see your pride and assume they've seen your whole nature. But that is never the full story, is it? What many people miss is how much tenderness sits behind your strength. How often your courage is built on heartbreak no one ever noticed. How many times you have been the one who made everyone feel more alive while privately wondering who, exactly, was making room for you. That is one of the deepest Leo wounds. Not being unloved, exactly. Being celebrated for what you give while remaining unknown for who you are. And once that pattern becomes visible to you, really visible, you cannot go back to sleep. You may already be noticing it. The delayed replies from people who used to come easily when you were useful. The slight tension when you stop fixing the mood. The awkwardness that appears when you no longer volunteer to be the emotional sun for everyone else. Some Leos are entering a season where the roles they've outgrown are beginning to crack. And when that happens, it may feel confusing at first. Why is this person colder now? Why does this connection suddenly feel off? Why does the space feel heavier when all I did was become a little more honest? Because honesty changes the architecture of a relationship. When you stop laughing at things that hurt you, people notice. When you stop calling it loyalty and start calling it overextension, people notice. When you stop translating your needs into something small and easy, so no one feels burdened by your truth, people notice. And not everyone welcomes the moment a Leo remembers their worth in real time. Some people loved your generosity when it came without limits. Some people loved your warmth when it required you to abandon yourself. Some people loved being near your light, but only as long as they never had to feel the discomfort of giving anything real back. That may sound harsh, but you do not need another soft lie right now. You need something clean, something accurate, something that lands in the body with that uncomfortable feeling of yes, that's exactly it. Leo, you are often taught to think of your pain in simplistic ways, as ego, as pride, as wanting attention, but that reading is shallow. The deeper truth is that many Leos do not ache because they need applause. They ache because they can feel when love has become conditional. They ache because they sense when they are being enjoyed but not cherished. They ache because they can tell when they are being admired from a distance, while their actual heart is being handled carelessly. And that is why betrayal hits you the way it does. Not because you are dramatic, because when you love, you bring your full life force with you. You don't hand people a polite little fraction of your care. You bring warmth, loyalty, protection. You remember what matters to them. You defend them when they are not in the room. You give them the version of your heart that still believes devotion means something. So when someone treats that casually, when they reduce something sacred in you to convenience, the injury does not stay on the surface. It goes deeper. It reaches the part of you that asks, was I only valuable as long as I was giving? That is the question many Leos are standing inside right now, even if they have not put it into words yet. And if you are, then listen carefully. This chapter is not here to humiliate you. It is here to refine your love, to separate your gold from your performance, to teach you that being radiant does not mean being endlessly available, to show you that self-respect is not a colder form of love, it is a cleaner one. But this is where the real tension begins, because your next evolution may require grieving a version of yourself that once felt beautiful. The version of you who could save the energy of a room. The version of you who knew how to stay charming under pressure. The version of you who could take emotional crumbs and still dress the table like a feast. The version of you who could feel lonely in a relationship and still be the one reassuring everyone else. That version of you may have been strong, but it was not always free, and freedom, for Leo, often begins in an unfamiliar place, not in applause, in disappointment, in the moment your heart finally gets too honest to keep pretending, in the moment you realize your loyalty has been expensive, in the moment you stop asking whether you are asking for too much and start asking a far more dangerous question. Why have I been asking for so little? That question changes everything. Because once a Leo begins to see where they have been shrinking, the whole emotional landscape starts to shift. Suddenly, you cannot unsee the one-sided dynamic. Suddenly, that close friendship feels strangely performative. Suddenly, the relationship that used to make sense starts leaving a taste in your mouth you can't ignore. Suddenly you notice how often you are the one initiating, soothing, carrying, brightening, forgiving, understanding, waiting. And then comes the most uncomfortable part. You may have to let people be disappointed in the new you. Not the cruel you, not the bitter you, the honest you. The one who no longer rescues people from the consequences of their inconsistency. The one who no longer treats scraps like proof of love. The one who can still be warm without becoming porous. The one who understands that boundaries are not a betrayal of your nature. They are an expression of your maturity. Some Leos resist that lesson at first because it can feel so unnatural. You are built with heart. Built with instinctive generosity, built to encourage, protect, uplift, but there is a shadow side to every gift, and one shadow of the Leo heart is this. Sometimes you would rather overgive than sit with the unbearable possibility that someone might not choose you unless you keep glowing for them. That is a painful truth, but it is also a liberating one. Because once you see it, you no longer have to live inside it. You can begin choosing from a different place. Not from hunger, not from pride, not from the need to stay impressive enough to be loved, but from groundedness, from discernment, from the quiet power of knowing that the right people do not need a constant performance to stay close. Real love is not built on your ability to keep everyone inspired. Real love can sit with your silence, your tiredness, your uncertainty, your need. Real love does not panic when the room is no longer revolving around what you provide. And that realization may be one of the first great turning points in this season, because once you stop confusing intensity with intimacy, a lot begins to fall away. The flirtation that only felt electric because it kept you anxious. The friendship that thrived on your emotional labor. The family role that rewarded your strength while ignoring your softness. The dynamic where you were the safe place for someone who never became safe for you. You may feel this shedding as grief before you feel it as relief. That is important to understand. Just because something is leaving does not mean it was meaningless. Just because a role was unsustainable does not mean it was fake. Some patterns carried real love inside them, just not enough truth to survive your next level of self-respect. And yes, that can hurt. It can hurt to stop being the favorite version of yourself in other people's stories. It can hurt to realize someone loved your access more than your essence. It can hurt to stop being easy to adore and become harder to use. But Leo, there is a difference between being desired and being valued. A difference between being magnetic and being met. A difference between being pursued and being known. And your soul may be done confusing one for the other. That is where the second wave begins, because after the disappointment comes the anger, not the reckless kind, the clarifying kind, the kind that says, "I see now," the kind that turns self-doubt into self-recovery, the kind that doesn't want revenge so much as truth. Not, "How do I make them regret losing me?" but "How did I abandon myself trying to keep this alive?" That is the kind of anger that heals. It may show up in ordinary moments. A text message you suddenly do not want to answer with your usual sweetness. A memory that lands differently now that you are no longer romanticizing it. A familiar excuse that sounds hollow the second it reaches your ears. An apology you once would have accepted instantly, now meeting a part of you that has become quieter and much harder to fool. This is not you becoming hard-hearted. It may actually be the first sign that your heart is becoming properly protected. Because for too long, many Leos have been praised for endurance when what they really needed was reciprocity. Praised for generosity when what they needed was rest. Praised for strength when what they needed was to be held without having to earn it first. There is a subtle cruelty in being admired for how much you can carry, and some of you are beginning to feel that now, beginning to realize that being the strong one often came with a hidden tax. People forgetting you are human while you are busy holding them together. And when that realization lands fully, something in you starts refusing old agreements. You stop volunteering yourself as the bridge between everyone's chaos. You stop swallowing disappointment in the name of peace. You stop turning private hurt into public grace just so no one has to feel uncomfortable. You stop mistaking your ability to endure for a requirement to remain. That is not a small shift. That is a soul-level reorganization, and it changes the way people meet you. Some may suddenly call you distant. Some may say you've changed. Some may act confused by boundaries they never had to face before. Some may even try to provoke the older version of you back into the room, the more accommodating version, the one who would smooth it over, take the blame, bring the warmth, and make everyone comfortable again. But what if comfort has been the cage? What if the version of you that everyone found easiest to love was also the version furthest from peace? What if this season is not punishing you with separation, but protecting you through clarity? Sit with that, because not everything leaving your life is a loss. Some things are evacuations, some things are exposures. Some things fall apart because they were built around your silence. And when you stop going silent, the whole structure reveals what it was made of. This is where your power becomes different. Not the power of charisma. Not the power of being unforgettable. Not even the power of walking into a space and feeling instantly significant. A deeper power than that. The power of no longer negotiating with what diminishes you. That changes your face, your energy, your choices, your standards. It changes the kinds of conversations you are willing to have, the way you respond to mixed signals, the amount of access you give to people who only know how to want you in fragments. It changes how long you stay in spaces where your heart has to disguise itself to belong. And once that power wakes up, people feel it. Not because you become louder, because you become unavailable for distortion. There is something unmistakable about a Leo who is no longer trying to win love through over-functioning. A steadiness enters them, a precision, a self-containment that does not beg to be understood. They stop explaining every boundary, stop decorating every exit with guilt, stop making their truth easier to digest for people committed to misunderstanding it anyway. That may be the third emotional rise of this journey, and it is where many of you reclaim something you didn't realize you had handed away. Your inner authority, not authority over other people. Authority over your own energy, over what gets your warmth, over who gets access to your tenderness, over how much of your spirit you are willing to spend in places that never intended to honor it. And let's talk about that tenderness, because this is where the story becomes more sacred. For all your visible strength, Leo is not made of armor. Not really. Beneath the will, beneath the pride, beneath the elegance and poise, there is often a deeply romantic heart. A heart that still wants sincerity, still wants devotion, still wants that almost childlike experience of being chosen with certainty. Not because you are naive, but because there is something profoundly noble in the way you love. When you believe in someone, you want to believe all the way. When you commit, you want to do it beautifully. When you care, you want the other person to feel it in the quality of your presence. That is not foolish. That is one of your greatest gifts. But the lesson now may be this: your tenderness is too precious to be given, where it must constantly fight to be taken seriously. You are not here to audition for depth. You are not here to coach emotionally unavailable people into maturity. You are not here to offer first-class devotion to those who only arrive with half-truths and temporary hunger. You are not here to keep translating your soul into simpler language so people can consume you without truly meeting you. You are here to live in a way that does not require self-betrayal. And yes, that may cost you illusions. It may cost you the fantasy of who someone could become. It may cost you the role of being endlessly admired. It may cost you certain people who preferred your warmth without your discernment. It may cost you the old identity built on being needed more than being known. But the price of staying the same has become higher than the price of change. That is the moment everything begins to turn. Because when Leo stops trying to be chosen by everyone, Leo becomes unmistakable to the right ones. When you stop performing strength, real strength appears. When you stop offering access where there is no reverence, your energy consolidates. When you stop treating your heart like public property, something magnetic returns to you. Not the kind of magnetism built on charm, the kind built on congruence. And people can feel that. They may not have words for it, but they feel the difference between a person who is available for projection and a person who is standing inside themselves. They feel the difference between warmth that can be manipulated and warmth that has boundaries. They feel the difference between generosity that is trying to secure love and generosity that is simply the overflow of a full self. That last version of you is the one this chapter may be trying to restore. A fuller self, a less apologetic self. A self who does not confuse compassion with self-abandonment. A self who understands that loyalty without discernment becomes self-neglect. A self who can still love deeply without making a home inside what hurts. And once that self begins to rise, your life may start asking different things from you. Different friends, different rhythms, different standards, different endings, different kinds of love. You may find yourself pulled away from noise, less interested in proving, persuading, performing, more interested in truth, in peace, in the slow, solid beauty of relationships where you do not have to wonder where you stand, more interested in work that actually respects your creative fire instead of exploiting it. more interested in spaces where your presence is not merely enjoyed, but understood. That shift can feel subtle at first, then all at once. One day you are still trying to keep everything intact. The next, you are looking around and realizing you no longer want what once impressed you. That is growth, quiet, irreversible growth. And some Leos may feel almost disoriented in that stage, because when you have spent years being the one who energizes others, it can feel strangely unfamiliar to pour your life force back into your own becoming. You may even feel guilt. You may wonder whether you are becoming selfish, whether you are asking for too much, whether it's really necessary to let certain people drift. But ask yourself this: what has being understanding cost you lately? Your sleep, your creativity, your body, your trust in your own intuition, your ability to relax in love, your willingness to be vulnerable without fear of being mishandled again. If the cost has been your aliveness, then the arrangement was never sustainable. And your aliveness matters, your joy matters, your dignity matters, your peace matters, your art matters, your body matters, your untouched, unperformed, unmarketed self matters. There is a version of Leo emerging now that no longer wants to be impressive at the expense of being real. That is a holy shift, a maturing of the fire, a refining of the heart, and I think some of you can feel it even now, like a low pulse under the surface of your life. A knowing that you are done with certain loops, done over-explaining, done chasing clarity from people committed to confusion, done trying to turn almost love into something stable through sheer devotion, done dimming, yes, but also done burning for what does not deserve your flame. That difference matters, because your lesson is not simply to shine brighter, it is to shine with wisdom, to know where your warmth belongs, to know when your silence is self-respect, to know when to leave the table without proving why, to know when a closed door is not rejection but redirection, to know when your heartbreak is not evidence of failure, but evidence that something in you has become too honest to keep pretending. And when you know that, really know it, a different peace begins to enter your life. Not a passive peace, not resignation, a fierce peace. The kind that comes from no longer being available for what fractures your spirit. The kind that lets you sleep. The kind that clears your eyes. The kind that restores your instinct. The kind that makes your laughter sound like it belongs to you again. That may be the part no one tells you about healing. It is not always soft. Sometimes it is clean. Sometimes it is exacting. Sometimes it asks you to disappoint people who benefited from your confusion. Sometimes it asks you to stop telling the story in a way that makes everyone else innocent and you simply too sensitive. Sometimes it asks you to admit that your heart knew long before your mind was ready to listen. Leo, your heart has known. It has known where the energy was off, known where the affection was inconsistent, known where the apology did not match the pattern, known where you were being adored in public and mishandled in private, known where your light was being consumed without gratitude, known where the connection kept asking you to betray your own depth. And now your life may be asking you to honor what your heart has known all along. That is not weakness, that is alignment. And alignment has consequences. It changes who can reach you. It changes what you tolerate. It changes the pace of your decisions. It changes the quality of your solitude. Let's talk about that solitude. Because for some Leos, this is where the next test appears. After the shedding, after the clarity, after the decision to stop abandoning yourself, there may be a period where your life feels quieter, not empty, just quieter. Fewer distractions, fewer false mirrors, fewer dramatic entanglements, fewer people feeding on your brightness while offering nothing stable in return. At first, That quiet can feel like loss if you are still measuring love by volume. But if you stay there long enough, another truth appears. Peace has a sound, and some of you have not heard it in years. The absence of confusion, the absence of chasing, the absence of that low-grade ache of trying to matter to someone who only meets you halfway. The absence of self-betrayal disguised as patience. That quiet is not punishment. It is repair. It is the space where your nervous system remembers it does not have to earn softness. The space where your creativity comes back. The space where your standards stop feeling like a performance and start feeling like home. The space where your spirit reorients around what is true. And from that place, Leo becomes almost unrecognizable in the best possible way, not colder, clearer, not less loving, more discerning, not less generous, more sovereign. You begin to attract differently because you are choosing differently. You begin to speak differently because you are no longer negotiating against yourself. You begin to walk differently because your energy is no longer scattered across people, dynamics, and fantasies that never deserved this much of you. And that is where your true radiance becomes undeniable. Not because everyone sees it, because you do. That may be the greatest awakening of all for Leo. The moment your self-worth stops depending on response. The moment your standards stop collapsing in the face of chemistry. The moment your tenderness stops apologizing for needing real care. The moment your loyalty becomes sacred instead of automatic. The moment you realize that being misunderstood by the wrong people is not a tragedy. Abandoning yourself is. So if you have felt the tension building lately, if you have felt more emotional, more perceptive, more unwilling to keep participating in what drains you, do not rush to make yourself smaller just because the shift is uncomfortable. Something important may be happening, something overdue, something your soul has been trying to bring you to for a long time. You may be stepping out of a life built around reaction and into a life built around truth, out of exhausting magnetism and into embodied self-respect, out of roles and into identity, out of proving and into presence. And yes, some people will fall away when you do that. Let them reveal themselves. Let the weak structures crack. Let the almost love fail its own test. Let what is unsustainable become visible. You do not need to hold everything together anymore. You need to hold on to yourself. Because the future opening for you does not require a shinier mask, a better speech, a more strategic way of being lovable. It requires the courage to remain whole, to stop trading your depth for attention, to stop offering your loyalty where it is handled like an entitlement, to stop calling it patience when it is slowly eroding your spirit. Leo, there is a version of you on the other side of this that feels lighter, cleaner, stronger, and strangely more peaceful than the one who began this chapter. Not because life suddenly becomes simple, but because your energy is no longer fighting itself. Your heart, your standards, your intuition, and your choices begin moving in the same direction. That is power. Not the kind that dominates, the kind that refuses to be divided. And once you become that person, something extraordinary happens. Your presence changes not because you are trying to command the room, but because you are no longer asking the room for permission to exist as you are. Your voice changes, your timing changes, your gaze changes, your relationships change. The entire emotional atmosphere around you changes because you are no longer available for the old terms. People feel that. Opportunities feel that. Love feels that. And the ones who are truly meant for you will not be intimidated by your wholeness. They will rise to meet it. They will not ask you to shrink your standards, soften your truth, or bleed warmth into places that have given you nothing solid in return. They will bring steadiness, reverence, reciprocity, the kind of care that does not vanish the moment you stop performing. Until then, let this be enough. You are not difficult for needing depth. You are not arrogant for choosing dignity. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not too much because your heart has finally become honest. You are becoming accurate. And that accuracy may be the beginning of everything you have been asking for. So take a breath, Leo. Let the old role burn if it must. Let the false closeness fade. Let the borrowed identities fall from your shoulders. Let yourself grieve what you hoped certain people would become. Let yourself mourn the time you spent translating your worth into forms they could understand. Then stand back up, not as the version of you built for survival, but as the version of you built for truth. The one who loves deeply but not blindly. The one who shines fully but not for sale. The one who can be generous without becoming depleted. The one who can walk away without hating. The one who no longer mistakes being wanted for being valued. The one who knows that a heart this loyal deserves a life that is real. Because that is where your next chapter begins, not in proving, not in chasing, not in being endlessly available, but in becoming unmistakably, irreversibly, entirely your own. And when a Leo finally does that, everything false starts losing its grip, not all at once, but enough. Enough for the air to feel different. Enough for your body to unclench. Enough for your soul to recognize the road beneath your feet. Enough for the future to open. You may have thought you were losing people. Maybe you were losing disguises. You may have thought you were becoming harder to love. Maybe you were becoming harder to misuse. You may have thought the fire in you was fading. Maybe it was only leaving behind what was never meant to survive the truth. So do not fear the shift. This is not the end of your warmth. It is the end of your self-betrayal. And that, Leo, may be the moment your real life begins.